Hello, this is Jonathan at the Piano Lesson. Today, we're going to talk about Thelonious Monk's Blue Monk, a deceptively simple song, but a fantastic song, and I'll show you how it's a wealth of ideas. So let's get right into this, and we'll play the tune a little bit, and then we'll talk about how it's constructed. Here's the tune. It's typically played in B flat. You could play in any key you want, but here's the tune. And often we hear it not just single notes. That's the single notes. So there's the basic melody, but usually we don't hear single notes. We hear parallel thirds often. And that just has a fantastic sound right away. You know, it has tremendous color to it. E flat 7. E diminished, B back to B flat, F7, so basic chords, we have our 12-bar blues, B flat, da da, E flat, da da, E flat 7, B flat 7, and it repeats, E flat 7, and then E diminished 7, back to B flat, and another, that's a repeat sign, and then F7, and then another F7, and then a B flat 7, and then an F7. Now, so you got 4, 8, 12 bars, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There is your the infamous 12-bar blues. Is it really infamous? I don't know. Probably not. Now, I'm just playing quarter notes in the left hand. There's a lot of other things you can do as well. Rather than playing thirds, you could play 6. And the fingering I'm using, by the way, for the thirds, you could use the same fingers if you want, all the way up. That's one sound. Or you could potentially use different fingers. You could alternate, your fingering. I don't know. Here's an interesting, starting with 2 4 or 2 5 1 4 2 5 1 4. That's another fingering I might use sometimes. Or if you're using the 6 1 4 2 5. You could do all kinds of interesting things. So that's just parallel 1 4 2 5 1 4 2 5. That's a possibility. Or you could reverse it 1 5. And just connect the top notes if you want. That's a possibility. Also, the ending. That's a typical ending. You could do something like that. B7 with the ninth. passing chord, all kinds of interesting possibilities. Now let's take a look at the melody, the construction of the melody, just compositionally. You have this, and then you have this. That's right out of the basic composition book. That's repetition. D, E flat, E natural, F, right? That's 1 and 2, 1 and 2 and, right? So those are eighth notes. Right? 1 and 2 and 3, 4. That's the basic rhythm, let's say. You could maybe make that into a half note if you want. You could make that into a half note and get rid of the rest, but that's the basic rhythm. D, E flat, E, F, and all that line there is chromatic, which means that it's made up of half steps, mostly of half steps. And then it repeats up here. G, A flat, A, B flat, G, A flat. Whoop, what am I doing there? You got to catch me in those mistakes. G, A flat, A natural, and B flat. So that's pretty much exact repetition in that these are all half step intervals. And notice that you're starting on the third of the chord, B flat, D, F. That's the root third fifth, root third fifth. Right. So you have this ascending, Ascending. It's an ascending line going up. All right. And then if I did it starting on F, for the F chord, right? Now, if Monk could have done that, he could have gone, he could have just repeated that over and over. That's a song. It's not nearly as interesting because after he does this. Now, Monk never played a tune the same way twice, but at the very least it's right. That it's at the very least it's that. Okay. So what does he do there? He takes this line, this ascending line, and he effectively descends. Okay, he descends. But see, a lesser composer would have just done that. You know, he might have done that. That's kind of simple-minded. Oh, maybe that's being unfair, but you know, F, E, E flat, D, but it's definitely a lot more simplistic. F, E, E flat, D, right? So he doesn't quite do that as simple as that. He does this. Now just that. And then he stops at the E flat. So what does he actually do? He goes up to the G. That's a neighbor. That's called a neighbor. So I'm going to rewrite that. That's a neighbor tone. Now what makes it a neighbor? Well, it moves by step, and it goes back to the same note, and that same note is usually a chord note. So F, G, F, F, G, F, E, E flat, F, G, F, E, E flat, and then it goes, then F, C, F, D flat, well, let's call it a C sharp, so I don't have to write the natural sign. C sharp, D, da, boom, 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 boom. More eighth notes, 4/8 notes. E flat, F, E flat, F, C sharp, D, D, and that's held, and then D flat, C. Still the same chord, so it's all over B flat 7. So he goes up and down to the F, that's the neighbor. That's the neighbor tone, right there, that G. Da, 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 da. Now, rather than going immediately to the D, rather than going immediately to the D, rather than going, right, he elongates it. He kind of augments that melodic idea, goes down to this. And those two notes, what chord does that imply? Well, that implies F7. So you get your chordal ideas from the melody, right? So even if in the real book it says, you know, a different chord, we pretty much know that's an F7 chord. I mean, it's going to... I could stay right on the B flat and no one would be the wiser, but that... Now, when I play that, F7, the C sharp, what is that? That's augmented. Now, that's not going to say that in the real book, but you know, that's the chord. It's F7, and then F7 sharp 5. B flat 7. That C is the ninth. So B flat 9. Now, again, those are the types of things those are the types of details that you want to flesh out in the tune, all right? So B flat. Now that's all chromatic. So that does imply other harmonies, you know, potentially C minor, C sharp diminished, B flat 7. You have diatonic harmonies and chromatic harmonies. But, you know, we're playing in the key of B flat. It's a blues, so it's B flat 7. So really, the scale we're using is not so much a B flat major scale, right? Because we have this A flat in there from the B flat 7 chord, right? That B flat 7 has to have an A flat in it. B flat, D, F, A flat. Those are the chord notes in there, right? So what key are we in? You know, if I really had to pick a scale and pick a key, I would say that we're in B flat Mixolydian, right? In other words, we're playing the notes of the E flat scale, but we're starting on the 5th note. The other possibility is, you know, perhaps they say, well, if you're playing a dominant 7 chord, you could play a Dorian mode. Why do they say that? Well, because the notes in the scale are they sound like they mostly fit in with that scale. So you'd say, well, what's that? What is that? Well, a B flat is the 2nd note of what scale? A flat. So if we play the notes of the A flat scale, but we start on B flat, I mean, that works to an extent, but I think this is more indicative of the song. Why? Because it comports better with the chord, all right? But that's where you get other scale ideas from. You know, the default scale often is the Dorian scale, but I think the Mixolydian is the better choice here. So C minor in the key of E flat major. The 6th chord is C minor, and anytime you're going from one chord note to another chord note, you can use a chromatic, use a diminished chord. You're going if you're moving chromatically. So in this case, if we're going from that D flat is I'm going to consider that to be out of the key. That's a chromatic note, right? So we have, right? We have the, and then we have the, and again I'm playing the B flat 7. So depending on how you want to think of the C minor, but I think of the C minor as being kind of being in the key. You could think of it as the 2 chord. It fits in with the scale perfectly well. And then likewise, you could do that. But I wanted to get back to the melody here. It goes up, and then it goes down again, but it does it, it's decorated, it's embellished with the neighbor tone. And then that resolution to the D is delayed. You're outlining the F7 chord, augmented. So if I had to encapsulate that melody, it's really, that's really the melody. This note is almost like in Bach, it's almost like a rhythmic note. Da, 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 da. Notice how that's delayed. And remember, da 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 da. That's really, and it really foreshadows this. It really kind of foreshadows that part. Then here's your diminished, all chromatic. Well, that's, now here's your ending. This. Or the B is the substitute for the F. That's your tritone substitution. So you have 2 choices. B flat, B flat 7 in first inversion. Huh. That's a possibility too. There's some subtleties here you can kind of play with. So there's the tune. So if you're going to improvise, you probably want to use this chromatic line. That's the material that you would use to do your improvisation. Starting on the 3rd of the chord, or starting on the 5th of the chord. So I just took that line and transposed it. Now I started, rather on the 5th, I started on the 6th. That's an interesting idea. So that we might call that the 13, but that, if it were really strict, we wouldn't consider that part of the chord. You know, that could be considered an appoggiatura. So rather than treating that extra note as a neighbor, we're starting from above. That would be considered really more of an appoggiatura. So an appoggiatura is, my definition, it's a wrong note on count 1, but it's a non-chord tone. Going down a fourth here. That's just a little arpeggio, a little broken chord, but that fourth, that perfect fourth, really to me is part of the song's personality. Parallel sixths. All those sixths. And let's just try to play a little bit on it, just when I won't think about this too much. Now I'm distorting the rhythm. That's E7. That's a substitute for the B flat. That's a blues scale right out of the box. So you see what I'm driving at? You try to get your musical ideas from the material that's already in the song. I could play any notes. I could play all kinds of inventive improvisational lines that are not related to the song at all. And they wouldn't sound bad necessarily, but it wouldn't sound like the song anymore, and it certainly wouldn't sound like Monk. So if the improvisation is not going to sound like the song and it's not going to sound like the composer, I don't see the point in bothering. Why not just write another song? Just make something else up. That's kind of my acid test. If someone walked into the room and they kind of knew the song, could they tell what song you were playing based on the information you were giving them? But you see, there's a lot of potential that already exists in the song, just compositionally. And he is taking this little kernel of an idea, these little 4 notes, this little chromatic line, and he's exploiting them. He's developing them. So he's developing them first through repetition, then moving backwards. That's referred to as inversion. But he doesn't do it quite literally. He embellishes the inversion a bit. So he uses the neighbor tones, and he uses these, for lack of a better word, I'm going to call them kind of like rhythmic underpinnings. They're almost evocative of another musical voice, even though we consider this, that low note, we consider that a melody note. It's really too wide an interval, in my estimation, to be considered a melody note. And that kind of thing happens in classical music all the time, where sometimes you're faced with problems of bringing out a melodic line, and there isn't any good phrase marks in there. You hear this a lot when people play Beethoven. They actually mistakenly include those in the melodic line, and Beethoven's very explicit about them. He beams things together and puts things, make sure there's certain rests in there, and make sure the stem directions are going in different directions. But that kind of thing can happen inadvertently if you're not careful about that. So that, to me, that can be taken one of 2 ways. But it's also teasing you. The F is kind of teasing you, and the word I use is foreshadowing, so that you're hearing the end of the song in the beginning. Okay. And the end of the song is the dominant chord. It's always in the key of B flat, it's the F. So that balancing act of consonance and dissonance, and giving you some of the story but not all of the story. Anyway, that's all I have to say about that today. And I hope you have a great week and enjoy some great practicing and playing. And I'll see you next time. This is Jonathan at The Piano Lesson. Visit me at thepianolesson.com for less information. Bye-bye.